In Football Manager, what are the most important attributes? What are the ones you should focus on when you're looking for players? In this video, we'll go through position by position, and if you want to jump to a particular position, there are timestamps you can use to do that. So I calculate scores based on attributes when I'm judging players in FM. And so just to show you my save how I do that. So I've just won the championship QPR in the second season, going into the third. And this is what my squad looks like. If you take the attributes out, calculate a weighted score, and put it back into this browser window here. And there's a video in my channel of how I do that. I use Python to do that. And it says that our best striker here is called Rodriguez. He's 13.4, and he's really the only striker I've got of Premier League quality. These two are on loan, and so they're going back to their parent clubs. And then the next best striker, this is a different position, and then the next best striker at 12.4 I know is not really Premier League quality. So I need to find players, and I use these scores to find players that are of Premier League quality. Now it's the 1st of July in game, and that means, and I'll just show you briefly how I might go about doing that. If you look for players that have got expired contracts on the 1st of July, because most contracts expire on the 30th of June in game, and so on the 1st of July, it's a good day to do that. Particularly a club that's rising through the leagues might have relatively low reputation compared to other clubs in the league. The day after contracts expire is a good opportunity to try and get players that are better than the sorts of players who will normally want to come and play for you. And spoiler alert for the rest of the video, pace and acceleration are probably the most important attributes. So I set a baseline depending on the league I'm in. For the Premier League, it's 13. I'll show you why I think 13 in a minute. And then that will ask the game to give me just the players that have got expired contracts and 13 acceleration and pace. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in, I'm just going to click anywhere in here, and then use Command A and then Command P to bring data out of the game. I'm going to put it somewhere where I know where it is. And then I have a Python piece of Python code here. And I say my other video covers this, that will then read that and give me a set of scores for all the players that I've just taken out of Football Manager and put into the Python code. And then when it does that, I want a striker. So the weighted attribute score calculates the best striker according to the weightings and according to the data I've given it. And it says the best out of contract striker that I can sign now is this guy Correa. Now, if we just go back, 13.4 for Rodriguez, I thought was a sort of Premier League ready player. John Jules at 12.4, I did not think was Premier League ready. And so we can look at the scores for these strikers. There's people like Neil Mopay there, that in real life, I think people would say is a player that's sort of a weak Premier League player, potentially. But at the top of the list, we've got this guy Correa, and he is interested in signing for the club. I should have made clear when I did this, I put slightly interested here, which is a way to sort of have players that will actually want to sign for you. I did that in the filter. So if I look at Correa, I'm just comparing to John Jules, who is our striker that at the moment is in our squad, but probably isn't Premier League caliber. You can see the difference. And so we'll go ahead and trial a Correa and sort of go from there. Now, why did I put pace and acceleration 13 on this player search filter before I went ahead and calculated the scores? Well, first, let's deal with the level 13. If you go to this squad planner screen and then down here to comparison, for your league, currently we've just joined the Premier League, you will see, and let's take goalkeepers off, you'll see the average for defenders, midfielders and strikers, the average pace. And it says in the Premier League, the average pace is 13.95, so call it 14. And the worst pace is 12.7, and the best pace is 15. So if we get to 13 pace as a sort of minimum level, then we may be able to compete in the Premier League. I think if we're below 13, it's going to be difficult. And you can do this in any division to check, and you can do it by different types of players. But just to keep it really simple, I put 13. Now, why did I put pace and not other attributes? Now, there's going to be, I'm sure there's controversy about which attributes matter the most, and I'm sure people have got their views. I'd love to hear your views in the comments. But there's a few things that are guiding my views here. One is just simply playing the game for a while. The second is this approach I take where I calculate these scores, so I've been able to refine it over time. But also, if you look at this testing on this website, FM Arena, and the link to this is in the description. What they've effectively done here is they have run the game and then they've gone back and run it again changing specific attributes one by one. So the idea is to figure out which attribute makes the biggest difference. So for example, here, wherever they started, they reduced positioning by 4 points across all the positions. And instead of getting 53 points for the season, they still got 53 points for the season. Didn't really make any difference. And so on and so on and so on. So as you go further down this table, you should get the attributes that make the biggest difference. And sure enough, when you get to the bottom, it's acceleration and pace, and they make a much bigger difference than all the other ones. Now, there's a lot of different ways you could read this table, and obviously lots of different ways you could analyze this out, and you could try to do it with varying levels of rigor. But this is how I come up with the idea that acceleration and pace are important. And if you look across the FM forums in various places, there are lots of people that focus on pace, and obviously people who think that to some degree you can focus excessively on pace and kind of break game outcomes. Not trying to do that here. I just want to emphasize pace and make sure I've got enough pace for a player to compete in the Premier League. They're basically not so slow that they can't compete in the Premier League regardless of how good they are. The thing that you can find on FM Arena, which is a helpful website when thinking about attributes, is this post, which again is linked in the description, where somebody has found and translated into English some material on an FM forum from some Chinese guys who were developing a basketball computer game. And in doing so, they've used various analytical techniques, look like some AIs involved, machine learning, and so on, to try and back solve FM to some degree. And if you go down this, you can read this stuff, but if you jump to this in particular, this is an attempt from these developers that were developing a basketball game. They have simply played FM a lot, and they've used various techniques to analyze FM, and they've concluded they think these are the most important attributes by position. So one way you could play FM if you wanted to is you could be completely mechanical about this, and you could use these weightings and you could go from there. And sure enough, if you look on FM Arena, you will find people that use Genie Scout to do that. They've got filters that do this, and that's sort of the way that they've searched for players. What I've done is I've simply looked at this together with other things in my experience, and also some of the other cues the game gives you. What we'll do now is we'll go through position by position drill in and see what my scoring code does. Let's drill into a position, and here's the goalkeeper position. So here's on the left here, we've got the weightings from the basketball game developers from FM Arena. In the top right hand corner here, we've got an example of a player. This is my goalkeeper in my QPR save. And in the bottom right hand corner here, you've got the code that I use in Python to calculate a weighted attribute score. So what I'll do is just explain why this code is what it is. You'll see it takes two of the attributes, agility and reflexes, and multiplies them by 5, which gives them a particularly high weighting. Why is that? Well, if you look at this, agility has the highest weighting and reflexes has the second highest. And that strikes me as pretty sensible. And in game, I think you can notice once you start looking for it, that goalkeepers with superior agility and reflexes are clearly quite a lot better than goalkeepers that don't have that. So I look for that, I focus on that. I want players with high agility and high reflexes in goal for my team. We've then got a second group of attributes in the weighting, and so it's 1v1, anticipation, command of the area, concentration, kicking, and positioning. Now, you could argue with some of those that they've not got as high a weighting as the others. If you look again across at this, you might not, for example, include kicking. But I just, as time's gone by, I've tweaked this. You could tweak it slightly further. I think the key point is you want to have a good spread of these. You want to try and focus highly on agility and reflexes. And I think within reason, you could optimize this obviously further, and you could really try to make this exactly optimal. But I think broadly, this scoring system is going to find you good goalkeepers with the green and blue numbers up here, sort of reasonably high. The game tells us that the green are the most important for the role. The role I've got up here is sweeper, keeper, on defend, and that blue is the sort of next most important. So you could just mechanically say green's more important. You could use this weighting, you could use a blend of them, and you can see I've come up with a blend of them. And so if you look at the goalkeepers in our squad, again, just to do a quick example of that, We've got two goalkeepers. We've got Labrovic, who've just signed, ready for the Premier League, and then Roberts, who we had as our Championship goalkeeper, and the scores are 13 plays 12. So basically a point of, these are out of 20, basically a point of attributes being better. And if you do a side-by-side comparison, you get an idea of what the scoring system has done, because in essence what it's doing is the closer you get to the top of the Premier League, the players get more complete. And as you go sort of down through the leagues, the players will focus more on the most important attributes. If you take Roberts here is on the right-hand side, yes, his agility is good. Yes, his reflexes are good, and really almost as good as Labrovic. But if you look at things like up here in the top left-hand corner, Labrovic has just got more. He's a more well-rounded player. And so as you go through the leagues, the players get more well-rounded, and then also the very top attributes get higher. So that's goalkeepers. Okay, on to fullbacks. And you'll find, by the way, these pages that you can see on the screen as a PDF linked in the description below. You can download them. Fullback or wingback. I use wingback on support, so the one that's a notch further forward towards the midfield on the screen in a 3-5-2. But I think it's broadly the same, regardless of whether you're a fullback or a wingback. Again, here, if you look at the weightings from FM Arena and the basketball game developers, they're saying acceleration and pace, and then stamina and work rate. And really, that's no great surprise. The players that don't play in the boxes, so not the centre backs and not the out-and-out strikers, everybody else, as well as good pace and acceleration, work rate and stamina seem to make a big difference. So the coding, again, if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, it really looks for work rate, acceleration, pace and stamina as a kind of essential group. And if you look at the code at the bottom, all it's simply telling the computer to do that is weight them 5 times more than the least important attributes it includes in the calculation. It's just a weighting. Those numbers could be different, and you get different scores. It might be 4, it might be 6, it might be 10, I don't know, but it's just a higher weighting. Next group, core, is got here crossing, dribbling, marking, tackling, off the ball, teamwork. Some of this is driven by this, and some of this is driven by simply what I think, having played the game for a while. I do notice in my 3-5-2 formation that a lot of if you look at expected assists in the game, a lot of the expected assists come through the wing back. So I think sort of having the crossing and dribbling seem to be a good way of showing their ability going forward. So I like to have that. And then there's a bunch of other things which again are based on the green and blue really as much as anything else, just sort of mopping everything up. A player that scores well across all these attributes with a heavy focus on work rate, on acceleration, on pace, on stamina, tends to be a good wing back. And if you look at this top right hand corner, this is a right back I've just signed from Leicester City, I think it was. And in fact, let's find the player. Mankia, here we go. And Leicester have just been relegated. This player didn't make it into their team. He was available for 750,000. For me, that's happy days. I think that's a pretty good wing back. Hits all the spots that I'm looking for. Next one, onto centre backs. So again, looking at these weightings, acceleration and pace, recognise that's high on pretty much all the outfield players. It's then fairly surprising after that where the drop down is, and the drop down is to composure and to jumping reach. And I think I'd probably be in line with many FM players. I would rate jumping reach higher than that. And just as a sort of natural point, I always look for players over a certain height, over a certain jumping reach. I also like bravery as an additional point because I think it helps with set pieces. But again, I can't verify all of this. The rigor in what I'm showing you here, is only up to a point. But that's what I've always done. Again, looking at the score, there's a core group of attributes and a secondary group of attributes. It's telling it, rank the core higher than the secondary. And in the core, I've put composure, heading, jumping, reach, marking, passing, positioning, strength, tackling, and then pace. And it may well be there's a more sort of reduced version of this, which really just focuses predominantly on pace, acceleration, jumping, reach, and composure. But I don't like that. I think some positions more than others, what I've noticed in doing these scoring systems is some require a bit more well-roundedness than others. I think centre-back does, and I think the central midfield does as well. So that's what I do, and again, that seems to work for me. And if you download the code that's in this in the description of this video, and also in my previous video, you'll find that it calculates this. Of course, you can amend the code as you see fit. Moving on to central midfield. This is the defensive midfielder, but then with an attack designation, the segundo volante attacks. And again, the green and the blue, these follow the roles, and the roles clearly make some difference. And I look at the roles in calculating the code. I think the guys that put this together think the position's more important than the role. And again, you can sort of have different views on that. Here, I think the most important one is work rate, and I noticed that very clearly, that work rate in the defensive midfielders seems to be the number one most important point. I don't really agree with this low tackling grade here. I tend to look for tackling, but really, if you look at the code, again, this reflects what I'm looking for: work rate and pace first and foremost, and then stamina, passing, and then another grade down, tackling is in there with a few others, and then. But really, if you follow this code and you get players out, you'll get players like this one with solid pace, good enough for the league, 13 in the Premier League, 16 work rate, and then good enough at everything else. You know, decent passing, decent tackling, and a pretty well-rounded player. I think a midfielder needs to have more good attributes probably than the other positions in the game, and they maybe don't need to be quite so high. They just need to be more. They need to be pretty good at lots of different things. Moving on to strikers. So if you've got wingers or number 10 your formation, I've got you. I'll get there in a minute. But in my tactic, we don't have those players. It just goes straight to the forwards. And I have the forwards advance, forward, and attack, and the codes here. Looking at the weightings again, acceleration and pace, high finishing. The one that surprises me on this, and this is based on previous iterations of FM. And just generally playing the game for a long time, I would expect composure to be higher, and I would expect off the ball to be higher. Going back a long time in FM, and into 10, 15 years ago, there are people that looked at FM very, very closely, and off the ball was the most important attribute in the game. And I'd be surprised if it's fallen off this much. I could be completely wrong. Certainly some of the testing in FM Arena doesn't agree with me, so it could be wrong. But for what it's worth, in the code that I use, which works for me, the most important attributes are these core ones: composure, finishing off the ball, and pace. And then I always look for pace, and increasingly I find myself looking now for jumping reach, because the way that set pieces have changed for FM24, you need enough tall players to be put into the right positions by your set piece coach. And I find one way to do that is have 3 at the back and then a tall centre forward. So that's the strikers. I'm going to then cycle just quickly through wingers, and then also attacking midfielders. And for those using the Python code, if you add these codes in AMC and AMRL in the relevant parts of the code, it will calculate those scores. The last thing on this video is just to check that if you use these scores in this approach, you get a sensible answer from the Python code on who it thinks the best players are. So to test that, what I'll do is just look up the best strikers in the world. So I'll take, instead of saying who's interested in coming to play for QPR, I'm putting slightly interested. I'll get rid of that, and then we will just load up the filter I use for a striker. So there are baseline values here for the various attributes that we've just been looking at, which is just to make sure that there isn't an attribute that is important, which is well below a kind of baseline level. And if we take off, as I say, take off whether they're interested or not, you're left with 85 players above this sort of baseline level. And what I'll do is just run the code on these, which will then ask it to calculate the best in the world. And this is a bit like the, over the last decade or so, I know people in football who work on data have got the so-called top right Messi phenomenon, which is if your analysis thinks Messi's the best player, it might be a decent analysis. If it doesn't, you have to look at your analysis. Nowadays, I think you'd call it the Mbappe and Haaland phenomenon. So let's have a look at that. And sure enough, on this weighted score, it thinks that Mbappe and Haaland are the best centre forwards in the world. And if you go down, you've got other players going down. And how long do you have to go before you get a player at any kind of sensible valuation? Here's one. If you're doing a save with a big club and you're looking for a striker without paying crazy amounts, even Nielsen here, moving a bit further down, where's the first sort of genuinely inexpensive one? That's inexpensive, I guess, by Premier League standards. going down, going down, going down. Um, that's a value choice here. Koita going down. You have to go a long way to get a very inexpensive player as a. I guess that's your on this scoring system, which again, I'm not saying it's perfect, but please do leave feedback and comments on this because I'm very interested to see what others do or what others think is useful. But here, for example, if you're looking for a young forward, here's one, and sure enough, I think we'll be seeing if we can scout that player for our QPR save. Anyway, that's some thoughts on the best attributes in Football Manager. I hope that's helpful. I think in the next video, I will probably go on to see if we can sign a striker for QPR, because we do need a couple of them. And so if you'd be interested to watch that sort of case study of signing a specific player using this method, using this approach, then I'd suggest that you subscribe to the channel here, and I'll post that video up once it's ready. Thanks.